Welcome back, and it's with great pleasure that we welcome two ambassadors to join us for this next session, and they're both going to speak to the topic of commemorating the Great War in Europe and Australia. Again, as has been the practice, I'll introduce the two of them together, and then I believe our first speaker will be the ambassador from France, His Excellence Stéphane Romatet. Stéphane has been the ambassador, to be a little bit more formal, French ambassador to Australia since November 2011, so just about 3 years now. We're into the third year at least that he's here. He has had an extensive and distinguished record of contribution to the French diplomatic service, both in France and in several overseas postings. You can see the record in our little blurb here. We were just talking briefly about his time in Australia, and he's at that point where new prospects might emerge, but he has had sufficient experience to know us well and to understand particular strengths about the relationship between France and Australia. So it's with great pleasure that we have Stéphane Romatet with us. Welcoming us, on the other hand, is a very new ambassador to Australia, the new ambassador to Belgium, and I'm pleased to introduce His Excellency Jean-Luc Bodson. Jean-Luc has been the Belgian ambassador to Australia and New Zealand only since October, and he also has worked in the diplomatic service for Belgium for quite some years, and again with a number of overseas postings, as well as time in the ministry in Brussels. He says this is his second visit to Melbourne, so still plenty to learn about us. But we've explained to both ambassadors that you're not just a Victorian audience, but a mixed audience, not just from parts of Australia, but from New Zealand as well. So we've got a variety of perspectives in the room. If I can introduce and ask Ambassador from France to speak first, and then the Ambassador from Belgium. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Do we need the microphone, or is yeah, we need the microphone. Okay. Is it working? Right. Yeah. Well, thank you, Bruce, for your kind words, and I'm very, very pleased to be here. I find you very courageous, to spend your holidays and to come here for a 3-day working session in the middle of the summer, so I'm very glad to be here with you. And it's I'm even a bit in a quite awkward situation because I understand there are many professors in French among the audience, and so it's always bizarre to speak in English and to address to an audience which is mainly composed of people perfectly understanding French. I'm very pleased also to have this occasion seeing you, Bruce, once again, and also Ben there. Ben is a long-time friend. We met in Canberra, and I'm very glad, Ben, we have this occasion to meet again here in Melbourne. And third, also, it's a great pleasure to be with Jean-Luc. Once again, it's quite awkward, to be the first time ever for me, to be with the Belgian ambassador speaking with him in English. But anyhow, I think it's a very, very good symbol to be together and to have the chance to speak with you about this issue of commemoration. Your subject is very topical, crisis and commemoration. I will come to the issue of commemoration just in a few moments, but of course you can't understand what is Europe today without having the global historical perspective. I would say that Europe in 2014 is the legacy of Europe in 1914 in a way, and I'm quite accustomed to say that the two bastard parents of the European Union are the Great War and the communism. And but this is not the topic of the day. But of course, you can't comprehend the European project. What is Europe today? Not in its technicalities, but in its philosophy, in its aim, without having in mind what happened on the killing fields in Flanders, the north of France, between 1914 and 1980. And so, of course, the subject of your seminar yesterday and tomorrow, Crisis and Commemoration, Europe in 2014, I find it absolutely accurate and topical. So I was asked to make some comments about the commemoration. I'm not an historian, so I will not pretend, giving you any lesson in terms of history. This is not the issue of the day, and we discussed that with Jean-Luc to have a good share of work between him and I, and not to duplicate what we are going to say. I just would like to make some global remarks about this commemoration of the Great War. Just to start with, if you look at in the recent history, the past decades, you would never find any such occasion in celebrating and commemorating an event of that magnitude. So we are in a situation quite unique in which the commemorations of the Great War are the first experience of that kind ever. And second reflection, this is an issue, this commemoration process, of highly complicated and I would say tricky problem and issue. And I would like to maybe elaborate a bit on that. When you are looking at this issue of commemorations, I think we have to address some key questions. What? Who? When? And in a way, where? Let us start by trying to elaborate a bit, and I would like maybe after to open the floor for discussion, but the issue of what. What will we commemorate for the centenary of the Great War? Would it be a victory? Would it be the celebration or the commemoration of a disaster? Would it be the anniversary of reconciliation? You can choose any angle and you will probably find a bit of these three elements. And for example, for France, it's very simple. If you look at the way we have commemorating the war in the past decades, I think we have gone through those three angles. We started by commemorating the victory, and I think that until some veterans were still alive, the angle of commemorating in France was mainly through this idea of 1918, the victory over Germany, the victory over the Germanic Empire. I think this angle is now gone, has been forgotten. And in the past, I would say 2 decades, in France, the commemoration of the First World War is still very lively, in the mind of the people. You can't meet anybody in France who hasn't had, a close great uncle, great parent, great cousin, whatever, killed, hurted, injured, or having disappeared in France. So even 1 century after, the memory of the Great War is still very lively, still very there. And when you visit France, in any single town, any single village, any small place, you will find a remembrance place. We have 36,000 monuments morts. I don't know the exact translation in English, but remembrance monuments in every single place in France. And so very much part of our own history and identity, and still very much alive. I tell you that because in the past, I would say in the 2 past decades, the angle of commemoration was passed from victory to the celebration of disaster, or the evocation of disaster. And today, there is, I would say, a new historiography of the First World War, and we are going mainly through the commemoration of reconciliation. And of course, this is obvious, you know, it's very much linked to the European project, the idea of overcoming, you know, decades and decades, centuries and centuries, 3 wars between France and Germany. And as you know, the EU project is at its very origin, a way, you know, to go beyond the historical dispute and challenge between France and Germany. But when you look at, you know, this issue, what to commemorate, my point is every nation has its own agenda. And it's very much different whether you are belonging to the winning camp or the losing camp. Whether you are also belonging to an old nation or to a new country. And this is very, of course, obvious here in Australia. And for the Australians, I'm very struck by that, the commemoration process is in a way a narrative of the origins of the country. The way Australia, in a way, was born on the killing fields in Turkey, in France, and in the Flanders. So, you know, this is something I think we have to think a bit between us, what to commemorate, what would be the message of those commemorations. You don't have any single one. It would be very different from one country to another one, because at, you know, the core of the issue, you have your national identity, you have the relations of your country to history, etc., etc. So first question, what? The second question, I would say, even more tricky. Who? Very, very, very difficult. If you try to set up today the lists of countries who have participated to the First War, it's almost impossible. If you take the list of 1914, sorry, you know, the list of countries which have declared war on the 2nd of August 1914. 30 countries on the Allied side, and 10 or 12 on the Empire side. Look at the map today, almost half of the belligerents of 1914 have disappeared. The 3 empires which were at the origin of the war, the German Empire, the Ottoman Empire, the Austrian-Hungarian Empire, have disappeared, gone in the dustbin of history. Another element, you know, the Balkans. The Balkans today absolutely do not reflect what the Balkans were at the beginning of the 20th century. Another element, decolonization. Just one simple example. We are now rediscovering what was the contribution of the French colonial empire to the Great War. You know, there is the story of all of these, what we call the Senegalese infantrymen. We took them from Senegal. It was a French colony. You know, those guys never left their villages in the countryside, and they were brought on the killing fields, you know, facing the worst climatic conditions, etc., fighting for France. They didn't know what France was, only the colonial power. And we are also discovering this colonial angle of this history. But all this colonial empire has completely disappeared. So the issue is today with who commemorating the centenary. France will organize in 2014 some big events, especially on the 14th of July, Bastille Day this year, 2014. We will invite in Paris all the countries which participated at, you know, a certain point in the First World War. We are in a way sending invitations to 72 countries on both sides, you know, the Allies or the empires. 40 countries, or roughly 40 countries, engaged at the beginning of the war, 1914. 72 countries invited for Bastille Day. You know, this comparison in figures just show you the magnitude of geostrategical change which occurred in Europe all the century, and also show the complexity in organizing commemorations in countries which were not existing when the war occurred a century ago. So the issue of who is very difficult, very complex, very critical. So what, who, and when? Very, very, very difficult question. I think two elements on that. The first element is that the centenary would be probably the first historical event of this magnitude being commemorating in a long period of time. You know, usually you celebrate an anniversary, it's an event, it's a one-shot, just for one date. Here, no, there is no date. You will commemorate a period of time of 4 years. And every country will have, during this long period of time, this own internal agenda commemorating such and such, such or such a special event date during this period of time. The second point is that usually when you commemorate a war, you commemorate the end of the war. So, usually or normally, you would have to commemorate 1918, the end of the First World War. But no, we will commemorate, in fact, with a kind of big impact, certain magnitude, the start of the war. So the issue of when is quite important. Is it a good idea to commemorate the start of the war rather than the end of the war? And during this exceptional length of time, full 4 years, when to commemorate such or such event? I think each country, as I said, has its own national agenda. So the issue of the when, in a way, is also quite complex. And I just want to finish, because I don't want to take too much of the time in the discussion, just to mentioning another issue, the issue of the where. It's very, very strange, and we are between us, there will not be any press report of our seminar, I hope so. But I'm very much fascinating at being here in the country. I've been here since for now a bit more than 2 years, 2 years and a half, to see the way Australia has appropriated the Gallipoli site. And Australia is not the owner of Gallipoli. In a way, Gallipoli was more a French-British offensive in terms of numbers, in terms of intensity of the losses, in terms of military history, rather than an Australian one, frankly. We had in Gallipoli double number of deaths compared to the Australian figure. I mean, it's not a competition in terms of how many dead on the ground. But it's very strange to see, and I think it's a good way also in reflecting the way each country has a natural tendency to appropriate certain locations of the war for, I would say, its own internal agenda. This is the same in France. In France, Verdun, maybe some of you have already visited Verdun, very, very impressive site to visit, is now, I would say, the epicenter of the commemorations. Even if, the scale of the combats was enormous, the front on hundreds and hundreds of kilometers, there is a kind of historical process in reducing, the length of this front, and to reduce the symbol of the war, the First War, to only a limited number of locations. And the issue of which location to select, so the issue of the where, is also, I think, an interesting one. So I think that I have just, put on the table some of the items, what, who, when, where, and I would like very much to hear from you how you see those issues, those questions. And just a word to finish my brief presentation. I think if we look at, with a kind of scientific and objective view this centenary, we can say that it would be certainly the first time in modern history during which we will celebrate or commemorate. This will be the first globalized, worldwide event of commemoration. You don't have any other example of that kind, and so, this also raises the issue in globalization in the field of memory. Well, I think I've made my few comments, and after Jean-Luc has also presented his own remarks, I think it will be interesting in interacting and raising and continuing the dialogue. Thank you very much.